All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Lee McDonald, Director of Counseling, Health, and Wellness for the district. I'd like to welcome you to our annual college admissions panel. Obviously, this is a new format for us, but allows us to connect with colleagues in higher ed across the Northeast. So I'll introduce our panel in a minute. A couple just housekeeping items. Number one, I am recording this, and we'll make sure to post it in the coming days on our district YouTube channel. Also post it on our social media at WWP Counseling. That said, it's been a long 15 months, to say the least, in terms of the pandemic. I'm certainly thrilled, as I'm sure a number of you are, that we're heading in the right direction. Certainly not out of the woods yet, but I hope that you and your family and loved ones are doing well. I just want to reiterate, even after tonight's presentation, if you have questions about the information that's being covered here, that you kindly reach out to me directly. Certainly any of our school counselors. We'd be happy to guide you through the college admissions process, as they're already doing for a number of our students currently, whether they're in their junior year or just finalizing their college decisions as seniors. So that end, there has been a lot of changes in the college admissions process, and I think this really started prior to the pandemic. There were some shifts in terms of holistic admissions pieces. We're going to jump into those conversations. Obviously, you think about the test movement process that's happened over the last 15 months, many of that had already been happening prior to the pandemic, and certainly more equitable admissions practices. So there are some hot topics. We're going to dive into some of those. We're also going to talk a little bit about just some traditional things that you, as a student, as a family, should be preparing for and thinking about, whether you're currently a ninth grader, 10th grader, or junior. We want to make sure that you're well informed, and we want to make sure that you're hearing directly from the source, which is why we bring on admissions reps directly from the college and universities that recruit our area and consistently come back to WWP, because we are in a great spot. So with that said, I'm going to just quickly introduce our panel. They've shifted a little bit on my screen, but I'm going to start with Mr. Tom Becker from University of Pittsburgh. I'm going to give him a minute just to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about the University of Pittsburgh.
Sure. Tom Becker, University of Pittsburgh. Formal title is Associate Director for Regional Recruitment. We have 11 staff that are sort of strategically placed throughout the United States, and we have 2 in New Jersey. And I'll put their contact information at the end so that you can get that. But Pitt, as we are known, is a doctoral extensive research one university, bringing in almost just under $1 billion in research funding every year. We have 6 teaching hospitals sort of right next to us within walking distance, 5 of them owned by the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, 30,000 total students, about 19,000 undergraduates, and about 40% of them come from outside the state of Pennsylvania. The #1 feeder state, you guessed it, New Jersey, like many. Yeah, exactly. Got the glad hands there. They major in over 100 different degree programs. 95% of the arts and sciences students major in things that they didn't know before they arrived. They have double majors, minors, certificates. And so that we're a place like that, a place that allows you to have a city-esque sort of feel. We're not downtown, right there downtown. We're just over here, but easy bus ride. Students really do call the city of Pittsburgh their campus with their 89 neighborhoods. And I've talked too much, and I'm going to be quiet because this isn't about Pitt. It's about you and this process that you're beginning. And so I'll leave it at that.
Great. Thank you, Tom. I'm going to introduce Vanessa Devereux from Montclair State University. And just for the good of the group, I have posted links to the university's websites in the chat. And also, we do have the Q&A open. We'll certainly try to take some questions at the end. We do have a lot of questions that we already have come up with to cover a lot of different topics. But Vanessa?
Sure, thank you so much. My name is Vanessa Devereux. I'm the lead admissions counselor in undergraduate admissions here at Montclair State University. I also did my bachelor's and master's here at Montclair State, so it is definitely home to me. And Montclair State University is approximately about an hour north of your school here. So if you're not familiar with Montclair State University, it is the 2nd largest school in New Jersey. So we currently have 21,000 students at our campus here. And you are going to see a wide range of students from all over. So currently we do have every single state in the United States that we have here applying for international students, and out of the undergraduate class, very diverse. So you're going to see all different types of walks of life here. We also are a designated Hispanic serving institution, and we are a top-ranked school for college pride for LGBTQ+A. So this is really great for those that want a more diverse environment. We are also 12 miles away from New York City. So this is something that we love to highlight, that you have a suburban campus. It's overlooking its own little hill on top of Route 4, Route 46. But you do have New York City very close by, with our 2 train stations as well as our own NJ Transit access station. So very, let's say very commutable. We do have about 60% of our students commute to Montclair State University. We're technically located in 2 different counties and 3 towns, so pretty big. But we do have about 40% of our students live in our 10 different residence halls, and that's about 5,000 of our students that do live on campus. And in terms of programming, we are also a research institution. So we have everything from bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degree programs. And we have over 300 academic programs. Those are going to be those minors, majors, concentrations, as well as dual degree options for our students as incoming freshmen. And then for students that are coming here to Montclair State University, while it does seem like a large school, we are actually a medium-sized institution. And for class sizes, we do keep it on a smaller side. So it's going to be approximately about 25 to 30 students to a class. That's about a 17-to-1 student ratio. So again, even though it's a little bit larger for New Jersey, we are medium-sized and do keep those class sizes a little bit, again, towards the smaller side here. So this is something you should know about Montclair State University. And I believe in some of our questions, we'll go a little bit deeper about the institution. So thank you again. I'm glad to be here.
Great. Thank you, Vanessa. Appreciate it. Ms. Chandra Juice from Wesleyan University in Connecticut.
So it's so appropriate that I'm following Vanessa right now, because one of my former institutions at Cornell University, for which I worked at, the Vice President of Student Affairs is an alumna of Montclair State. So go Montclair State in terms of a great undergraduate preparation for higher education. I'm Chandra Jostikhoven. I'm the Director of Admission at Wesleyan University. I'm so pleased to be here with you today, or this evening rather. We are a progressive liberal arts institution that was founded in 1831. And though we can't say we put the sciences in the liberal arts and sciences, we were one of the first to introduce and teach natural sciences, as well as contemporary literature and modern language. We're also one of the first to actively recruit undergraduate students that had not been well represented in higher education in the 1950s and 60s and beyond. And this diversity is well represented when you look at our community today. So our community is comprised of 3,000 undergraduate students, 200 undergraduate students. So we have university in our name because we do have a graduate program. And so the graduate program, again, as I mentioned before, is 200 in size. So the focus is really on that undergraduate experience. But a couple of things to think about as you're thinking about Wesleyan. We are an undergraduate institution that subscribes to the open curriculum. So we're one of 25 institutions that gives great agency to students in terms of navigating their own educational pathway with the support of our advising system between pre-major advisors, our class deans, as well as peer mentors, as well as we invest heavily in our student experience with $5,000 to $10,000 grants and are committed to access.
Excellent.
So Lee?
Thank you very much. And I apologize, Jostikhoven. I messed up the last name. I had the first part in email, but I will take responsibility for that and get that corrected. So great. Thank you very much. Again, as I said before, we posted in the chat the links to the various websites of the college and university. Traditionally we have had a few more representatives, but obviously with the Zoom, we wanted to keep this to a tighter conversation. The first question really is, how has the pandemic changed your admissions practices? And I'd like to give each one of you to just kind of talk through what that has, the impact that has had. So anybody can jump in. Tom, you want to jump in?
Well, I would say, my hair was black at the beginning of the year, and now it is white. I've been in the admissions business for over 25 years, and this is by far the most unique year that we've ever had. We feel, and I think people all across the nation, we love in-person activities just like you. We love showcasing in our university. We haven't been able to do any of that. And so how do you overcome the Zoom fatigue, which I'm certain all of you in the audience are familiar with? How do you determine sort of demonstrated interest, and how interested are students and families from this process? We received more applications than we ever had in the past, and the thoughtful manner of going through those applications, especially with the new test optional. Our university had not been test optional. We were definitely moving in that direction, moving very forcefully in that direction, but without people being able to test, it just through jet fuel onto this process. And so a lot of long nights and a lot of uncertainty. Yet y'all are pretty amazing, because I think that if I could sum this all up in the process, and we'll see here soon, is sort of who shows up in August, and then how did they return the next year. We're really fortunate that like 96, 98% of freshmen return their sophomore year, an incredible sort of retention. And not having students and families be able to be on campus and see the place, definitely we'll see how this progresses through. So it's not over. It's not over, but those would be my observations, if you would. And I don't know if that's the right direction you wanted to go, but I'll leave it. I know that some of my colleagues.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. And just a side note, I guess some of the audience are having trouble hearing you, so just be conscious of that. But maybe Vanessa, you want to jump in?
Sure. So the pandemic has definitely affected every institution, and with Montclair State, with recruitment, the obvious being that there really wasn't an in-person part of the recruitment process. So most of our recruitment, well, all of our recruitment had been done virtually. So that is the case with all of our college fairs, and we have tried to adapt by offering through our website, montclair.edu, we have a virtual resources page just for students. So it's for students and families, for guidance counselors, for prospective students, as well as admitted students. And these different virtual resources are, we've developed webinars just for students that are starting the admissions process and want to learn more. So at the time when we couldn't have in-person campus tours, we have virtual campus tours, interactive campus tours with our admissions counselors and our admissions ambassadors, so current students. We also had virtual offerings where you could do what we call Red Hawk Talks with faculty of your academic program. So this way you could learn more directly about the academic programs. And we did also have virtual open houses and accepted student stays. So this way you get to learn all about the different aspects of Montclair State through the safety of your own home. In addition to this, we did have some effective practices in terms of our actual admissions and application process. So in light of the pandemic, Montclair State wanted to be very flexible during COVID-19 and with how students are applying. So we did actually move to Common App this year. So we were an institution where you could only apply through our website directly, but we had then moved to Common App so you could do either or applications. And with it, we wanted to have students the flexibility of being able to submit their transcripts directly from the school, or you could upload it yourself, since some high schools were having trouble with that delivery early on. In addition to this, we were very flexible with having our essays optional for most programs, except for those that specifically get reviewed with the personal essays. And we also were very flexible with grading, as some schools had the pass-fail grading. when everyone had to go to virtual learning. So that was a help for students knowing that with the pass-fail grading and some of these flexibilities, it's not going to count against them. It's not going to hurt them in any way. So I would say those are the biggest things that have impacted Montclair State University, and also the students that are applying to Montclair State University, that we try to help them out as soon as possible and also be available to them, such as telecounseling with the admission counselors at pretty much any time of the week. So those are definitely the most affected and different practice we try to overcome with COVID-19 currently.
Great, thank you. I don't know, Chandra, if there's anything you would like to add specific to Wesleyan.
I guess if I can add anything that was a positive of COVID, it was that more of our institutions were thinking about, we are all thinking about access for our students that aren't able to make it to our campus, that aren't able to necessarily log in. We were thinking about how do we get the information to our students that are interested in our institutions, are great matches, in a way that it not only is live, but also recorded. So many of our institutions were thinking about that. And I have to say kudos to being able to very quickly pivot in a way where we are able to provide that access and support, as well as our peers on the secondary side of things, as well as community-based organizations. And so if there is a positive aspect of the COVID pandemic, that is one of them, because we recognize many of our students and families are not able to make it to our campus, are not introduced to us until the very last minute. And so we hope this is providing a platform for many in the future to be introduced to our institutions, to be introduced to our approach to higher education, and move forward. Wesleyan has been test optional since 2014. So we certainly saw a jump of students that didn't submit test scores, and that was something that we were prepared for. We also adjusted our system in a way that our first reads were actually blind of the test scores for those who were submitting. And so we wanted to make sure that we were looking at students within the context of their educational environment, what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, the rigor of their curriculum, and any contextual information that was helpful in that process. And we recognize that many students, so in addition to the transcript, we were looking quite heavily upon the letters of recommendation from both the college counseling office and teachers to get a sense of what students were dealing with in this process and how they were adjusting.
Great, thank you. And maybe as a follow-up question to that, what are some of the practices that you see your particular institutions keeping right now that we've been in a pandemic? Does that change anything permanently kind of going forward? And you may not know the answer to that question. I fully realize that. So it's a work in progress.
I hope that people can hear me better. I've switched microphones, so if not, please let me know and I'll try a third. I got it all set up, right? Because it is COVID. I think the two things, I will reiterate what Chandra just said. We will absolutely keep some of this virtual activity and many of being able to put more stuff on YouTube, so students at their leisure can go and access us and see if there is a fit. And then the test optional movement, again, it was moving in that direction already, and I think it's here to stay. We haven't made that decision yet. We're going to look at the data. We're going to be test optional through 2023. And then we'll look at those retention rates, right? Are students being successful? Are we in our office looking at the right pieces of the application and evaluating that in an appropriate manner, right? And so that's what it's about. It's about student success. It's about your success.
Great, thank you. And just for the audience, test optional movement. I mean, that again is going back several years. I would guess there were probably 500 or 600, maybe 700 institutions prior to the pandemic that were test optional. Last time I checked, there were upwards of 1,700 or so that were now test optional. Basically, essentially as part of your application process, you do not have to submit an SAT score or an ACT score. So while we're like kind of along those lines, and again, others jump in, with the test optional, how do you see that kind of impacting the admissions process going forward?
So Montclair State University has also been test optional since 2015. And for Montclair State, when they did studies about the effects of SAT or ACT scores compared to other parts of the application, they didn't see it as a determination of success while a student is in college. So for us, that is why we moved to test optional. And in terms of applications, I would say roughly a third of students do actually submit their test scores. And for us, we do use test scores in a way that could help your application. It can never hurt it. So for example, for some majors that might have certain GPA requirements, certain core grade requirements, having a higher SAT score could help them be placed into that program. So that's the reason why it could help, cannot hurt, and they're not required. But we've seen too, where your transcript, your GPA, and the course you're taking really do find what success you're going to have in college by looking at those 4 years that you've had in high school. And that to us is the biggest indicator of success in college. So that would be the most important factor and what we're going to continue to look at over the years in our admission cycle. And then that's why I mentioned how with COVID-19, I know a lot of students in the beginning too were worried because of the pass-fail grading, because for them, this was their junior year, their senior year. Coming up, they're going to see PFs and how would that affect them? And for Montclair State, it would not negatively impact them. We would look at the rest of their academic trends to make an academic decision on their application.
Great, thank you.
I would just add that I think pre-COVID, there was a significant conversation regarding demonstrated interest in an institution. First of all, at Wesleyan, we do not consider demonstrated interest as part of the conversation when we're reviewing a student's ability to do the work, be successful, and contribute to our institution. To elaborate on Vanessa's comments about going test optional, we too recognize testing, it was a better predictor of socioeconomic background and your parents' educational background than it was about success. And so many of our institutions, in addition to looking at applications holistically, and I recognize that that might be a very different concept for some families that may have had an education outside the United States, the holistic process of factoring in many different factors when reviewing a student and their potential contributions to our institutions and success is that we're also looking at non-cognitive traits of things like ability to overcome obstacles, abilities to navigate the system, communication, and so forth. And that's information that we get from letters of recommendation, and that's particularly helpful for us to understand. So we might be the first time a student gets a C in their life, and we want to know that they can survive that, and then they're going to be okay, and they will be okay at our institutions. But we also recognize that that might be hard for some of our students. And so looking at them within the context of their institution, how well they're doing, and also the skills, the non-cognitive skills that they've developed over time and that's introduced to them as part of this process is particularly helpful of being able to navigate, being able to self-advocate, be able to communicate and so forth is incredibly critical in this process.
Great, thank you for bringing that up. I mean, I think that's something sometimes that gets lost in the admissions process in terms of just demonstrating, hey, there are soft skills, right? For example, like what are some examples of how a student might demonstrate those other things that aren't necessarily the GPA or the test score? You mentioned the letter of recommendations. Any other examples?
I would say, within your personal statements, lots of times like if you're applying, getting real specific, if you're applying engineering or computer science, right? That we can see your math score, we can see your science grades, we can read that letter of recommendation from your science teacher. But that personal statement talking about maybe the robotics team and a failure and having to be the leader within that, or maybe that yes, you're really good, but you're actually in charge of the newsletter, or you're in charge of the fundraising, or you are in charge of that communication piece of it. That's like gold to us when we're reading those things. And this holistic review it's tough to explain, because there really isn't one factor that comes into play. It is multiple factors. And you don't know from our end what we're looking for. You don't know who's reading your file. Is it the old guy that when I have my bow tie on, I look like Mr. Fredrickson from the movie Up? Anyone see it? Anyone? Or is it the brand new admissions counselor? Or is it the dean of admissions, vice provost? You don't know. It is a committee sort of decision. And so you have to, I know I'm getting off topic, I apologize, but the list that you develop with your school counselors of schools that you're going to apply to is just so critical, because all of those schools will probably be really good schools. My son just graduated from Pitt this fall, and I'm on a roll, so I'm just going to keep going. This last a couple weeks ago. And the one thing that we had to talk to him a lot about is this concept of it. There's this one school that is my school that I have to go to. There are a lot of you are very fortunate to be in the United States of America. There are outstanding institutions here, and many really strong schools. But what fits you? It's not all about test scores. It's not all about the black and white. There's a lot of gray in there. And so you just have to be okay with putting yourself out there in this application process. So again, I went off on a tangent, I apologize, but that's—
No, I thank you, Tom. I mean, I think you bring up some really good points, and I think that's always a challenge for students that might have that one school that they aspire to, or a few schools that some of their classmates or their neighbors' children are aspiring to, and it comes down to the best fit, right? And it comes down to the fact that, as you said, that the admissions process has become increasingly holistic, in the sense that there are multiple criteria. It's not a formula. It's not necessarily GPA test score, boom, right? And that's a good thing. That's a good thing in terms of making things not only more equitable, but it's also a good thing in terms of being able to find the students that are a good fit for your campus, and vice versa, right? So I don't know, Vanessa, Chandra, anything to add to that?
I do have something to add. I'm not sure if these institutions do this, but some schools do have college interviews as well. And that's a part of demonstrated interest, whether it could be part of an instant decision day for a formal decision with the interview, or college interview, to actually show that you're interested and you're applying to the college. But that is something that you could look for maybe your top colleges, to see if they do host or conduct college interviews. And the purpose of that would be so they get to know you more while reviewing your application.
Great, thank you. Before we jump into some of the more traditional questions we usually ask, maybe talk a little bit about what you're anticipating for the fall in terms of the recruitment process. I know, Tom, you had mentioned some of the more online virtual tours and whatnot, maybe perhaps not going away in terms of the access piece, but anything that you're planning on kind of keeping or returning to more of when possible? And also, what does your institution look like this fall? Do you have plans for being open? I know that's yet to be determined in a lot of places, but.
So I'll be happy to start. So Wesleyan has been open last fall. We've been very successful in staying open and staying safe for our students and having a protocol in place for both testing and quarantining. And continuing testing. And so I'm in my basement right now because any administrator that didn't need to be on campus was asked to stay off campus. So welcome to my home right now. But I'm thrilled to say that we are planning to be open this fall for in-person. We are a residential campus, so for in-person learning, and that's very important for our students. But also, I will say, moving forward with the recruitment, we plan to be recruiting both in the virtual space, and we'll continue that in perpetuity, but also we will continue to be in person when we can and where it makes sense to be. And so it's a matter of trying to balance out are we welcome? Is it safe? Are we vaccinated to travel and so forth? Because certainly we want to make sure that we're keeping all of our communities safe when we're going out on the road traveling. But I think it's most important for students and families to know that all of our institutions are staying open 24/7 through our virtual programs, whether it's recorded, whether it's in person or live via Zoom. But also our students are very accessible to our prospective students. And that's a great way of learning more about our institutions, because quite honestly, we say wonderful things about our institutions through our publications, through our websites, through what we're sharing right now as representative of our institutions. But our students are the greatest representatives of our institutions and how we live our mission.
Great, thank you.
So very similar to Chandra, Montclair State University is planning to return to in-person learning for the fall. And we are still going to have some virtual options available, both in our course deliveries and also with our virtual recruitment. And that would be mostly for our virtual offerings, such as in-person and virtual campus tours, as well as our admissions and financial aid telecounseling. So that was something that it was a huge success. So you're more accessible. You don't have to go on campus or just expect a phone call. You could do some kind of Zoom telecounseling with us, and it's a little bit more immediate. In addition, I do just want to point out that every institution here should have, and probably does right on our homepage, a fall reopening or reopening guidelines about what their school is doing to be safe during COVID-19 and what students should be expecting in terms of testing, vaccination, how courses will be delivered, and what they're doing to ensure your utmost safety. And it's usually on the homepage of every institution, but families could look at this, anyone could look at this, and if they have questions about the practices for each institution, this is something I would definitely encourage families and students to look at.
The only thing that I would add, because Vanessa, absolutely, go to the websites, right? Because they will have the most accurate information. But I think plan ahead, because our tour sizes are limited, maximum of 10, right? And then that limits the number of people that we can bring to campus, right? And the size of the space, right? So plan ahead to make sure that you're not shut out of a date and time in which you might want to visit one of our schools. And I think that across the nation is pretty good advice.
Great point. Thank you. Really good responses. In terms of the various application procedures that you have in terms of the types of applicants, shifting gears here a little bit, early decision, early action. Can you walk us through what those different options are at your particular school and how they impact the admission cycle?
Sure. So at Montclair State University, again, you could apply through the Common App or through our website, but on both types of applications, it's going to be the same process. So we only have an early action option where you could do a priority deadline. An early action means that you're applying early for decision, but it is not a binding decision. So you could choose, you could go to stay Montclair or you could go somewhere else. But you are going to be receiving your decision a little bit earlier. But we are a rolling admission school, which means that we go all the way up until March for students to be able to apply for a decision. So those are the two different types of applications that we have. And I don't know if we want to go into the benefits of either one, or if we want to give everyone a response.
We'll do a little bit of both. That would be great.
Okay, sure. So for Montclair State, I would say the benefit of a priority decision or early action, again, is that it's a non-binding decision. So you could just know your decision faster. Yeah, you got into Montclair State. But also some schools with their priority or early action might have scholarship deadlines or certain program deadlines where you need to apply to a certain school before a certain date. So for those, it's usually a benefit to apply earlier, so that way you could be reviewed either for those programs that might have the earlier deadline, or for a scholarship consideration. So you always want to look at your schools that you plan to apply for and see what are their admission deadlines. So this way you have a list, you make sure you're not missing any opportunities for scholarships or for programs that might have some seat limitations. And then for roll-in admissions, the benefit for that is, again, you could apply at a very long period of time. So you could go all the way up until almost the end of an admission cycle. And for us, it's in March. So maybe if you're a student that is, say, borderline and you are struggling with some of the academic criteria, you still have part of your senior year to have those grades out and to be considered for a college. So that could be a benefit of applying later. Or maybe if you're still in trouble with FAFSA or financially, you could apply a little bit later, you'll still get packaged. So there's benefits to both. And for, again, Montclair State, we offer a priority decision, which is early action, and a roll-in submission. So we go all the way up until March for the application cycle.
Great, thank you. I don't know if there's similar at Pitt and Wesleyan, or.
Yeah, at Pitt, we're on rolling as well. A new piece to our process, though, is that yes, we'll have application deadlines, but we will also have deadlines to have your file completed, so that you have to have all of the information to us by a specific date. That is a new process because we have especially with when students want to start down the testing route this year and then could not get a test and switching over to the test optional admissions process, we're going to force you to make some decisions because while we are test optional, while we are rolling admissions, what that really means is that our admissions criteria will start to get more challenging the longer you wait. And we had a number of students this year that applied late because maybe they reached too high. And they weren't offered admissions, and they were really shocked because some of our programs were full, right? So how do you understand that? How do you know that in what each of the schools' policies and procedures are? You need to get to know your admissions counselor. You need to talk to the admissions counselor at each of those schools so that they can walk you through their processes. We have a guaranteed admissions program to medical school, highly, highly competitive. If you miss a deadline, you've missed the deadline. There is no flexibility. But sometimes we can be flexible. It just depends on the year. And so, Chandra, I don't know if you do early decision in that process.
We do. And thank you, Tom. So at Wesleyan, we offer early decision 1 and 2 rounds. And so to describe what's the difference between 1 and 2 is that in 1, you may know exactly that Wesleyan is your number 1 choice and you're ready to elope with us. And I would say for any student, family interested in early decision, whether it's 1 or 2, you should be having conversations, both as it relates to your ability to afford an institution and also our net price calculator for those of you who are thinking about financial aid and the affordability of a place like Wesleyan, but also having conversations with your college counselor. And we're going to ask you to do that as part of the early decision agreement. And so, yes, it is a general person's agreement. It is not a legal contract. We are not going to come in to your home and snatch your child away from you if they are admitted early decision and make you pay for our tuition, room and board, and fees. But rather, these are conversations, serious conversations you need to have as a family, that it makes sense for you. You've submitted the information through the net price calculator that's accurate to the best of your ability. And I say this with some hesitation because I recognize I'm a big fan of Zillow, and I like to manipulate the mortgage calculator on Zillow to afford that beautiful house I just saw. And my spouse loves to push back on me and say that that's not realistic for XYZ reasons. And so the best information you could put into our net price calculator, we're all required to have these net price calculators, so you have a general sense of what's going to be expected of you in terms of the cost of attendance. If you're submitting that information, that is helpful. But however, in the end, when you're submitting for Wesleyan, it's the FAFSA and also the CSS profile that we go on. So both the federal and also institutional methodology when determining the price or the ability to pay in terms of affording an institution like Wesleyan. That's information that we're going on. So we can't go back and say, yes, I recognize you put this information in and it wasn't 100% accurate, and it looked like our institution was going to cost you X amount of money to attend, but now that we have your official information, this is what we're seeing. And so those are conversations that might be hard to have. I would hope that you're having these conversations to begin with in terms of what has been put aside, what you're able to afford for an education, and what the student can expect in that process. And these are hard conversations. And I encourage you, if you haven't had these conversations, maybe when you're in the car sometime and it's dark, you don't even have to look at one another, and you can start that conversation by saying, hey, you know that woman from Wesleyan, and she said we should have these conversations. Maybe we should start having these conversations now about what has been set aside, what to be expected in terms of this process of, yes, please apply to all these institutions, but they may not all be readily available to you for XYZ reasons. And I think that's the best you can do for your student. I will wholeheartedly say that there is no undergraduate institution that is worthy of taking out $200,000 worth of debt to attend for a four-year institution. There are lots of great options out there. And so I will get off my soapbox now and pass it over to Lee.
No, thank you for bringing that up. Really good points. The financial aid piece is a huge component, and we always encourage families to have that conversation earlier than later for the exact reasons that you discussed. Just for the good of the audience, we had our financial aid night in September for the class of 2021. We did record that. So if you go under high school counseling, college admissions guides, you'll find the link. So you actually have access to that presentation. You have access to the recorded conversation with Andre Meglione, who is from the Higher Education Student Assistance Authority in New Jersey. So really good resource. So we'll certainly have that night again in September to make sure you're well informed of the financial aid piece. I do want to also highlight something that was also said before in terms of having that well-rounded list is really key, right? Then we talk about with students about making sure that they're looking at their kind of profile, if you will, looking at a particular institution's criteria and having that well-rounded list so that you're not stuck down the road. And that's something you work with your school counselor to kind of work through that process to make sure that you have schools that perhaps are quote unquote reach schools, right? In my opinion, Ivy Leagues, your most selective universities in the country, they're reach schools for everybody, right? So it's something to make sure that you have those lists, you have target schools right? You have schools that, again, the old term is safety schools, but again, you're well-rounded, right? The reality is there is no guarantee in terms of any particular institution. That's why you got to make sure that you have that well-rounded list. And we encourage our students to do that. So with all that said, what would you say now that you have some of these shifts in the college admissions landscape, what would you say is the number one tool in evaluating a candidate's application? Well, the number one thing that you're looking at.
That's just so hard, right? But I don't think it has changed. I don't think it's changed. It's the high school transcript, right? And the courses you've taken and how well you've done in those courses. That's the number one factor, period. You have to be able to sit in the classroom and do well. We don't want to bring you to a place like Pitt or any school and see you struggle, and then you can't participate in the out of classroom experience. You can't participate in all those other activities that make those 4 years of college just really, really special. Not that the in-classroom experience isn't, it is, but the out of classroom experience, a lot of people would say that's the most. You learn so much more. But the number one factor, when I look at a transcript, it doesn't matter what I'm evaluating at Pitt, the first thing I look at is that high school transcript. I will see everything from 9th through your junior year, right?
Yeah. Tom, can you mind elaborating on that just a little bit in terms of like, what are you looking for, right? Do I have to take all honors and AP courses? Do I have to take everything my 9th grade year? Are you looking for a particular, growth over time? Like, maybe talk about that a little bit.
Well, it depends, right? It depends on the other factors that I'm seeing in the application as well. But it's always there's like 5 or 6 questions in there that are coming to my mind. Yes, we want you to challenge yourself. Yes, we want you to take challenging classes, yet they should be appropriate to your academic interests as well. We don't want you to take all AP classes and have the water being put on your fire, and you just, when you get to me, you're just, oh, I can't do this anymore, right? So take appropriate classes. So if you're going into engineering, yes, I'm going to be looking at the math and science. If you're going into computer science, yes, I'm looking at the math, and maybe if the AP computer science is in the curriculum, that you would explore that. We get the questions all the time, should I take an AP, IB, college and high school, right? And I don't know if West Windsor has that option, but my response is always, which one challenges you the most? I can't tell you that answer because I'm not in the district, but which one is going to challenge you and propel you so that you're prepared when you come to my institution. And again, you can do well, you can do exceptionally well. And so I want some of my colleagues to provide some insight as well, because I think that they can help with that question.
Sure. So Montclair State University, we are also holistic reviewers. And yes, number one would be the academic transcript. So what we're looking for is your high school transcript, and that's going to show your academic record from 9th grade to your junior year. So we're going to see all the grades and your GPA. So we're looking to see your academic trend. So how well did you do year to year? We're also going to look at your cumulative GPA to see, overall how well you did. And then senior year, depending on when you apply, we might not be able to see what grades you have, but we'll be able to see what kind of courses that you're taking. And sometimes senior year courses are still important for the admissions process. We don't want to see sometimes that you took lunch in 3 study halls, but you might want to be, this is where you could still challenge yourself. And in terms of rigor of your curriculum, that can be important for us in terms of scholarships. So for us, we might be looking for any kind of AP courses, honors, dual enrollment courses with another college as not only success, but also that you're challenging yourself and could receive with a high GPA different scholarship opportunities at Montclair State. So we're looking at all the information on an academic transcript. So for an admissions decision, as well as a scholarship opportunity. And then we look at other supplemental items, such as letters of recommendation and your personal essay. And this will help us to get to know you a little bit more through your teachers and school counselors, as well as what you would like to tell us in your personal essay. And this will really, I think, truly help for certain academic programs where they're looking at a very competitive pool of applicants. And it'll also help students that maybe are borderline, which means that they're kind of right on the border of either being rejected or admitted into that program or school. And that can help sometimes with either needing more academic information academically, or by looking at those supplemental items to make a decision for an admissions counselor's perspective. So those are the items that we look at to really make a decision for general admissibility, but sometimes certain programs are going to look a little bit deeper into those courses and supplemental items. Usually the school or institution, when you're applying, they'll tell you the admission requirements right on the site. So if there's specific admission requirements for the school in general, or if there's admission requirements specifically for a program you're applying to, they will usually list it right away. So that way you have time to fulfill those requirements and prepare that necessary material to be reviewed.
Just to add to Tom and Vanessa's points, I would also elaborate a little bit on the letters of recommendation. And so, yes, the transcript is a snapshot. There is contextual information that we factor in. A student, we recognize that first year, freshman year is a little bit of a building year, and we're forgiving about that. We also recognize students transfer in. There are circumstances that are happening beyond the student's control. And oftentimes we're getting that information from the college counseling letter recommendation, but also the teacher recommendations as well. We're interested in how students engage in the classroom, and they're engaging with their peers and engaging with the curriculum itself. And so for us, as an open curriculum for which engagement is so important, and you cannot hide in our classroom, and engagement again is so important. We're not necessarily interested in the student who can soak up the information and spit out an A on a test. We're interested in the student that is pushing the conversation to that next level, that is asking these questions, that are thinking about the information at a different level, that are staying after class and having those conversations with the teacher. I think of A-Push all the time, of like, it's a curriculum that's forever going on. And when I took it, it was just up to the Cold War, but for now, for students, it's beyond that, and all the information you need to learn, but all the curiosities that you have. And so this is great information that we're getting from the letters of recommendation. Now, I will also say there's been questions popping up in the Q&A and in the chat of what can I do to improve my chances of being admitted to a great institution. For sophomores, know that you need to develop relationships with your teachers now and moving forward, because those are the individuals that are going to be writing your letters of recommendation. Those are the individuals that are going to be advocating for you. For juniors and for juniors now, be thinking about those individuals who might be writing that letter recommendation for you, that you might have now as a teacher and perhaps next year, and being able to have that conversation of, I may have struggled in this particular class, but I gained so much from this for XYZ reasons, and being able to advocate for yourself, because again, as I mentioned earlier, these are such great skills that you're going to need to have to be successful later on at our great institutions.
Great, thank you. Really good responses, really appreciate it. In terms of that student that's just kind of starting out, looking for that right fit, where would you suggest that they start in the process, and maybe your perspective on the rankings that are out there, right, that exists, U.S. News, World and Report, and whatnot?
I will start by saying, when I was going through this process decades ago, U.S. News and World Reports wasn't a thing because it wasn't a thing. So, Tom, I'm not sure if that was the case for you, but and I don't want to out you in terms of age, but it was a process for which there wasn't so much hyped up about such and such is a great school because it's number 5. You should say XYZ is a great school because it's a great fit and match for me, and it will allow me to be successful and support me during my 4 years of my education, and the fact that I'm paying this amount for my education. So those are the conversations you should have. It shouldn't be dictated. Your list should not be dictated by the first 20, 25, 50 schools, or even 100 schools on the U.S. News and World Report's ranking. In the U.S., as Tom had mentioned before, we're very fortunate. We're in the United States where there's more than 4,000 different colleges and universities. There is not a timeline or an expiration date when it comes to college. So we have students that will go to a 2-year institution or take time off and then will come to our institutions. And it really what matters most is that you have the drive and interest of going on to study a particular area, whatever that might be, and push yourself both personally, educationally, so that you can reach beyond, get outside your comfort zone and learn as much as possible in this process. And so go beyond US News and World Reports. Yes, that might introduce you to a school or two. For me, the schools that were introduced to me was due to March Madness and the top 16 that landed on March Madness. So I was looking at schools based upon that. Not necessarily the best way, but certainly it wasn't a ranking based upon this kind of nebulous formula that was out there that is forever changing to sell magazines. But I will say that that's an opportunity for you to be introduced to an institution. Go directly to the website, check out the mission statement, look at the population, look at what their values are, what their mission is, who they educate. If they're an institution that's solely focused on graduate students, maybe that's great for you based upon your educational interest in going into a very focused professional degree. Maybe that's not the best interest for you based upon what's going to work well for you. If you're a student who works well in a one-on-one, very small, intimate environment, Harkness table style environment, probably not best to go to a larger institution. If you're a student who knows exactly what you want to do, you want business, engineering, nursing, what have you, that might be a great opportunity for you to focus on the larger institutions as well, and also get that individual experience.
I just want to add too, so all great information, and if your school's a non-advanced school, you should probably have access to have a college profile. And what's really great about that is that it can help you explore the different colleges and programs, and usually have certain filters where you could search by your interests. A lot of times I'll give you filters to search by, programs that are offered. Some of them even have like where you could put your information academically and see what are your reach safety schools and your target schools. So I look at the different navigational resources available to you, and your school counseling department is one of the best resources to help you with the college process. But also starting with that college profile so you could see all the different types of colleges that are out there and kind of start narrowing down that list to see what's important to you. And then you maybe use those rankings to go, okay, these are the schools that I'm starting to be interested in. Are they a good fit for me? And what can I do to learn more about these schools or take advantage of some opportunities to get to know them a little bit better than just a ranking or the school website. But in addition to the college profiles, and a lot of them too will give you not only those matchmaking kind of filters, but they'll also sometimes tell you what kind of events are happening at those schools that you're interested in. So if they're having a campus tour, if they're having some kind of webinar and information session you could join, that's something that's great, obviously to jumpstart that. And your school counseling department typically has those nights where you're going to have college nights, you're going to have different college fairs, and what to do to prepare yourself for college. So always good to know your school counseling department and see what you should be doing in your steps as well. They're going to have great resources for you typically every fall and spring. But college profiles, if you could start that. There's many different resources. Naviance is a great one, College Board, Big Futures. to kind of help you jumpstart that career?
The strength of American higher ed, 4,000 colleges and universities. The weakness of American higher ed, 4,000 colleges and universities. And where do you start? Ultimately, exactly what my colleagues have said. You have to be active. Listen to trusted sources, your school counselors. They have helped hundreds of students walk through this process. And get to know your college admissions, the admissions counselor from the schools that you're remotely thinking about. They'll be able to help guide you as well. A good admissions counselor understands that it's not really all about your institution. It's about finding the right fit institution for the student that you're talking to. And that can be frustrating. It can be very frustrating, but this is a process. You're not going to wake up and know that this is the place I'm going. It's not going to be until 2 weeks, until April, let's say May 1, mid-April, when it's all going to sort of come together and to make that decision. So that list of schools, that's the most important piece, because if you really want to enjoy your senior year, you can develop that list, apply to those schools relatively early in the process, and then enjoy the senior year. And so, sorry, I went off, but excellent, excellent information.
No, thank you. Thank you. Well said, all three of you. A lot of different, really good information. In terms of the process and the journey, if you will, through the admissions process, who is a person you want to hear from the most, ultimately?
The student.
And I say that we have a lot of different resources. We have an amazing school counseling staff. We will have all these different events for parents and for students so that you're equipped to have that family conversation at home. But ultimately, the colleges and universities want to hear directly from the students. It's developing those relationships through that process, not only with the school counseling department, the teachers, your support system here, but it's making those connections in higher ed. So certainly a lot of different ways to do that. We have time for just a couple more questions, and I want to perhaps highlight a couple of things that have been brought up in the chat and Q&A that haven't been mentioned before. But anyone want to speak to any particular programs they have to support students with disabilities and how that process might look a little bit different for applicants?
I will just start by saying I think we all have offices of access and inclusion. And for students that are going from the high school setting to the college setting, there's a distinct difference between accommodations. And so accommodations in the high school setting is a little different than in the college setting. And so making sure your IEP is up to date or your documentation is up to date before your student goes off to college is helpful for that documentation because it is a right in the K through 12 scenario where it is a privilege in the college setting. And so in the college setting, it's reasonable accommodations and colleges get to determine that. And so the best information you can have is the most up-to-date information as you're leaving, but also as you're searching institutions, asking that information ahead of time. Do you need to disclose that on your application for a place like Wesleyan? You don't. That's something that can be disclosed later on after you've been offered admission, as you're considering us as a possibility of whether or not we have the resources necessary to support your 4 years at our institution. That can be brought up later on during the yield process during the summertime for you to, again, making sure that our institution or institutions can best support you. So I would just say that, again, all of our institutions have that. Some of us have programs that are more specific to students with learning differences. For example, like a landmark, like Thames Academy at Mitchell College, or as the SALT program and so forth. But all of our institutions do have an office to meet and address accommodations. It's a matter of making sure the paperwork is in place as a student leaves. And I recognize this is also part of that kind of offboarding, onboarding process as a student leaves the institute, leaves secondary education.
Great, thank you. Very thorough explanation. I'm going to try to jump in on some of the questions that have been brought up in the Q&A. We're not going to be able to get to all of them, but certainly we're here, the school counseling staff, to follow up. If you have specific questions, we'll answer them as best we can. Just, I know there are a lot of acronyms, a lot of terms being thrown around. I meant to jump in earlier. Demonstrated interest, what is it? I'll try to tackle this one just in terms of that engagement piece, right? There's certain measures I think that colleges and universities can use to assess whether or not a student has been on campus, has attended a virtual tour, has attended certain things. But that was a question that came up. I know that that's traditionally a little bit further down on the list in terms of the criteria or part of the admissions process, but that's what we mean by demonstrating that interest in a particular college or university. You didn't just apply and never have any sort of engagement with an institution in any format. Concerns with regards to developing relationships during the virtual environment. I don't know if this has come up with other applicants in the class of 2021, maybe perhaps feeling like, hey, I don't necessarily have as good of a relationship because I haven't been in school. I don't know if any of you would be able to address that concern.
So for us, again, we've been pretty flexible with the letters of recommendation and the personal essay, knowing that during COVID-19, a lot of it was virtual learning. So you might not have had some of those connections. And typically in the counselors, we require a teacher recommendation as well as a school counselor recommendation. They'll typically note that too. It's in a common application that there's been disruption for COVID-19, but they'll speak still to the best of ability. So it's something that it's not going to be judged harshly at our school because of the pandemic.
I would just elaborate a little bit more on that in terms of what Vanessa said, is that I can't stress enough how institutions have been flexible in taking into account contextual information. And there have been so many times when we've looked at a student's transcript and then we're reading the letters of recommendation and understanding that they're responsible for their younger students' education. They're responsible for getting their whole family to a Wi-Fi outlet so that that they and their younger siblings can log on and be remote. And so these are things that we're factoring in as part of the whole picture. And so I know there's lots of questions about, the trend of the application and the grades and so forth. Please know we're human beings reading a student and understanding how COVID's impacting our own lifestyles, but also impacting the students that we're reading and the lifestyles and the expectations that are forced upon them as a result of this. And so there is no particular formula that we're using, but rather using our good judgment and looking at how students are doing the best that they can given the circumstances to advance their own case, but also to support their family during this process.
Great, thank you. Another question came in. If I struggled one particular year of high school, does that ruin my chances in terms of getting into a certain college?
I think it depends. Depends on the college, university that you're looking at. It depends on the program that you're looking at. By and large, though, it also depends on when it occurred, right? If it was your freshman year and then all of a sudden we have this upward trend, yeah, that's going to probably be a little bit easier for us. If it's the sophomore year, you did really good freshman year, there was a dip sophomore year, but then you came back up out of it, yeah, we see that. If it's your junior year, that's the challenging one, right? When we see some trends that go down there. But some of the most powerful letters of recommendation that I've received from teachers were actually from teachers where a student had a poor grade in a class. And they really elaborate on the intellectual curiosity that student, the determination, and you can then see sort of a trend up. Maybe it was a math, right? And then it trends up. They just weren't a good geometry person, right? And that's like, that can be really good because you struggled, but you overcame, right? And so it really does depend. But if you're applying to like an MD PhD program, like Pitt has the GAP program, well, no, we have students that are really, really high and lots of applicants for that, right? So you got to get to know your admissions counselor and the people that can give you a better understanding of that.
Great, thank you. And what are some of the best ways to get to know the admissions counselor? That did come up in the chat.
Yeah, at the high school visit, if it's virtual or individual, at a college fair. Most colleges and universities on their website have their admissions counselors and their territories, right? And so you can email them. Lots of colleges in this virtual environment have interviews or one-on-one sessions. Some call them interviews, some call them one-on-one. Lots of ways to call it. But again, it's probably most important that we hear from the student as opposed to the parent. That tells us something. And yes, I know you're really busy, students, but I'm really busy too. And so, yeah, be respectful.
Great, thank you. I have two more quick questions I want to just tackle. Is it better to take that AP honor class, get the A, or I'm sorry, a B, maybe struggle a little bit versus the non-honors and get the A? I'm sure you get that question all the time.
I think it's all going to depend upon the institution and the course and the entire record. Do we admit students with C's? Absolutely. Have we gotten C's in our lives? I can say yes, I have. But and I learned a lot in that class that I got the C in, and so it will depend upon the institution. And so I think it's more of that contextual information of did the student take the class because they were truly interested and they couldn't see their high school career without taking this class with the quintessential teacher that everyone should have before they go off to college type of, but they are the hardest teacher known in the school and so forth, but they're not afraid to get that B or get that C in that class. And so there's something to be said there. There's that that bravery of curiosity. That's the bravery of, I don't necessarily care about the grade. It's about the learning process. And I will just say it, not that this was asked, but it's kind of on the same notion of, we always hear, what do I have to do? What do I have to take in order to get into a good college? How about, what do I need to take in order to be successful at a great college? And those are the questions that students should be having with themselves, with the college counseling team, with their advisors, with their parents. The mission process, you're going to get into a great school. We have great institutions. There is not as I mentioned before, a particular deadline or an expiration date on going on to college. There's access. It's a matter of, do you have the skill set and the background that's going to prepare you both the academic and the soft skills that you're going to need when you're struggling in the class. Maybe you were the straight A student and you got the first C in your life, and all of a sudden you hit a wall and you're just like, I don't know. I was pre-med and now I can't be pre-med anymore. Life is going to end now that I know it. Do you have that ability to step back and say, okay, this was a blemish in the whole scheme of things, I can move on. This is what I need to do to move on. And here are the resources that I need to seek out. That's what we're most interested in, is not necessarily, yes, we want to see that you're prepared, but how are you going to be most successful at any of our institutions? And life happens, and we recognize that, and we have great resources for you, but you need to be able to know how to utilize those.
Great, thank you. Last question. What should a high school student be doing over the summer? Do they need to go out and take extra classes? What do you recommend in terms of the summer programming or activities might look like?
My response to that is always do something that's going to push you a little bit, take you out of your comfort zone if you can, because then you can write some really interesting essays for me. And what that means for each individual student, it depends, right? The best essay I wrote this year, or I read this year, was about a student, because it was COVID, actually in a really interesting way. The gist of it was, I actually like my sister. I didn't know that before this year, but was able to look at the other parts of the application and pull that in a way that I was like, wow, this is really, they did a good job, right? And so they didn't have a chance to do anything to extend themselves this summer because of COVID, right? This past summer. But they did. They put themselves into their family. And that, there are opportunities. There are opportunities abound.
Great, thank you. And I would just echo that in the sense that it doesn't have to be an academic class that you take. It could be something that's, follow your passion, right? Do something. And we recognize that there's limitations because of COVID, and hopefully as things open up, that could be just about anything out there that's an experience for you that's beyond the classroom that will enrich your learning. So, develop those soft skills, develop other skills that you may not be developing necessarily in your studies. So, well, really appreciate your time this evening and joining us. Can't thank each of you enough in terms of representing your university and just providing some real insight for our students and families. I will just close by saying that, and I believe this came up in the Q&A, we are fortunate to be in a great district. Windsor-Plainsboro is well regarded at different colleges and universities. That's a good thing. The schools know our program of studies, they know our curriculum, they know the level of rigor. That said, you don't have to be perfect, right? You have to be able to navigate that, work with your support system, your school counselor, your teachers, your administration, and follow your passions. Find the right fit during this journey. It's a wonderful thing to go through as a family with the student taking the lead. But it's something that we want to encourage you to find the different options and find that best fit for you. And that's really what it's ultimately all about. And there are a lot of great options here in the Northeast, certainly these 3 institutions that have joined us this evening included. So with that, be well, stay safe. And again, we'll get this recording up on the YouTube channel for WWP in the coming days. And if you need something, please reach out. Thank you all. Have a good night.